Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today, welcome to our 50th episode, spectacular jamboree. Today, on this week's episode, we are covering two brand new records. We are going to be talking about the new album from acclaimed film composer and former new wave musician Danny Elfman. We're talking about his new prog epic thing, Big Mess. And we're going to be talking about the new album from Kentucky-based folk/black metal outfit Panopticon. We are talking about And Into the Light. And we're going to be talking about the record club this week. That episode goes up after this one. We're going to be talking about my recommended record, which is Earl Sweatshirt's Some Rap Songs. And Tyler, we have another thing going on this week. Yes, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, we haven't formally announced this yet. I should make a point of doing that before this episode goes up. But we are going to start. We're obviously taking a break, as I mentioned when we reviewed Temple of the Dog a couple of weeks ago, the grunge record. We're taking a break from our 91 retrospective for a couple months. And the reason for that is simply that we're trying to coincide a lot of these 1991 retrospective videos with the actual 30th anniversaries. And so the next significant 30th anniversary is not until late August. So we're taking a break from that retrospective, but to fill the gap and hopefully attract some new viewers, we're going to be doing something very special, which is the Radiohead retrospective, which is that each week for the next 9 weeks, including this week, we're going to be reviewing each of the studio albums of Radiohead, and also just kind of reflecting on their legacy, trying to give a kind of clear-faced approach to these records. There's a lot of discourse around Radiohead that tends to get very bogged down and, hyper praise, or equally just not really getting into the music itself. And especially on YouTube, there's a lack from my perspective anyway, of really properly interesting content actually talking about Radiohead. So we're going to hopefully do that. And we're going to kick off this week with Pablo Honey, their debut album. We'll be talking about that very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Their most interesting record.
You know what? There's plenty that's interesting about it to talk about, I think.
Sure.
Well, there is.
Interesting, like ramming a nail through my nutsack.
It's a record with one of the biggest songs of the 90s on it. And it also, I think, a lot can be said from this record about what Radiohead's initial place were in music in the UK in the 90s. And obviously, as we get through the rest of their records, particularly the two that follow it, we'll be able to reflect on how they progress and build off of that. So stick around for that. But yeah, let's kick off today, as we always do, with what we've been listening to for the past 7 days. We are sadly not joined by Saoirse this week, but the four of us will do our utmost. Jake, why don't you kick us off with what you've been listening to this week?
All right. I've had an interesting little week here. I've mainly been listening to, of course, the things we have been, we're going to talk about this week, just because we have a lot on our plate and some of them are a little bit long, but I've managed to get in a couple of things, a couple of very short albums that I listened to a few times. Notably, I'll start with my first album by the band The Strokes. I guess this is just like a Morgan thing with me, where it's just like, hey, you'll like this album, Jake. You should listen to this album, Jake. Here's this album. And then I just never fucking listened to any album by The Strokes. I didn't listen to the new Abnormal. I've never listened to This Is It. Never listened to blah, 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 blah. But I heard that Room on Fire is basically like good, but like not as good as Is This It? And I was just sort of like, okay, this sounds like a good entry point for me, so I can be like, this is good material from the band, but not their best, so I'll take a listen to it. And I don't really know what like the huge consensus on this album is, at least beyond this immediate podcast venture, but I quite really enjoyed Room on Fire. I wasn't what I was expecting at all either. I didn't even really know like what the Strokes were. Like I had heard that one song, was it Ode to the Mets, that was on our list last year. I'd listened to that just because it was on our list and I was like, oh, this is cool. And it's not really like that song at all. But it was just really cool. I was just like, this is a great like lazy afternoon album thing that I feel like I would have put on 1,000 times as a teenager.
Yeah, just the consensus on Room of Fire is very, very positive. Like most people love that record. I think it's a little forgotten. You know, we're so inured within this particular period of time where it's like music discourse online is dominated by like Gen Z and stuff. But like when Room on Fire came out, everyone loved it. It's still a very celebrated record.
Okay.
You don't have to at all feel like you're coming at this with a hot take. It's a very, very
good
beloved album. And it's a successful album too, like has some of their biggest songs on it. I definitely prefer Is This It? I just think that's a better record front to back. But the first 4 songs on Room on Fire, that run that opens the record is just stellar. I think I would even go as far as to say Whatever Happened is my favorite opening track of theirs, and Reptilia is maybe their best single. Reptilia is an amazing song. I love that track. I'm not a hot take. Obviously, it's got like fucking 100 million views on YouTube.
It's probably their biggest song. So
fuck. Okay, I'll just go fuck myself then.
I'm just saying you're not in danger of spewing a hot take here. No, be a dick about it. I'll kick your ass.
I will mail a dildo to you to New Zealand, and you can then proceed to fuck yourself.
Yeah,
on camera,
on
stream.
And I'll mail an even bigger one to you for that 5 out of 10 for Is This It?
I have seen a lot of people like.
Fine, I'll take it.
I've seen a lot of people recently dropping the hot take.
I'd like to see you try.
I've seen a lot.
All
of
right,
what were we talking about?
Will be sent.
I've seen a lot of people recently dropping the hot take that they think Room on Fire is the best Strokes album, which is both a hot take and also something I can completely understand. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a lean album and all of it's pretty great, so I can understand that. Speaking of shorter records, I also listened to Green Day's Insomniac because Saoirse listened to that, and I made sort of like a passing comment to being like, I think that like now these days I would say that that's my favorite Green Day album, and I listened to it, and yeah, it is. I for a while I said it was American Idiot just because, I'm a fucking basic bitch and I like all the singles on that album and I think it's just really good. And I still think that album's really great and it's really ambitious musically speaking, and I like a lot of it, but there's just something, I feel like as I get older, I just sort of appreciate the raw kind of leaner approach that some of their earlier records have. And frankly, I just find Insomniac to be a little bit more like wantonly misanthropic than Dookie, and a little tiny bit more consistent. Like I think Dookie's a great record. I'm not gonna spew a hot take or anything, but I just like the songs on Insomniac more. If I have any problems with it, it's mainly that it's like, hey, it's 30-ish minutes and it's great, it's consistent, there's no like sharp drop or any song that's significantly worse than the others, but it's pretty much 30 minutes of the same sound. So if that's kind of like a bother for you, or you want them to be more ambitious, look elsewhere. But I don't know, I gel with it, think it's perfectly like structured to suit its times that are sort of the sweet spot for all the eras of Green Day for me. Also, I took a listen to maybe the worst album I've listened to in 2021.
I know what this is.
Guns N' Roses GNR Live.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, it is the worst Guns N' Roses album.
See, Tyler, this is something where it's like I'm not familiar enough with their catalog to like be able to say something like this. And I don't like, the only album from them I listened to before was Appetite for Destruction when I was going through like a bunch of rock classics when I first started listening to music, and I didn't like that album. I still don't. But the thing is that it's just like you say, it's the worst Guns N' Roses album, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm sure probably like Rate Your Music probably has like a pretty unfavorable aggregate on this. And you look it up and it's got basically the fact that it has over a 3.0 tells me all I need to know, in the sense that it's like, wow, first of all, I am not going to like Guns N' Roses in any capacity if this is the consensus on them. Reading positive reviews for this album is like, I feel like I'm fucking, I feel like I'm Rosemary and Rosemary's Baby. I'm just being constantly gaslit and barraged by a bunch of insane supernatural nonsense, and I'm pretty sure that everyone who likes it is Satan. Like all of them. They're all.
I can't explain that 3.07 average or whatever it is, but I will say that when I say it's the worst album they've made, and I say this from the perspective of someone who had to listen to them a lot as a teenager and does like a couple of songs, but generally speaking finds them unbearable. It is the worst album by a long shot, and it's the shortest one too, which tells you a lot about just how barrel scraping it is.
See, the reason, and people might be wondering, it's just like, oh, well, if you don't like Appetite for Destruction, and it's no, like, I don't actually, it's not a secret or anything, but I don't even feel like this is a hot take, but it's just like, I hate Axl Rose. Fuck that guy. He's stupid, and I hate him. I hate his voice. I hate his stupid mouth, and I hate everything he's ever done. Fuck him. That said, I've been listening to a shitload of Smashing Pumpkins for the last 4 months, so I really like August. Maybe take that dildo and actually go fuck yourself. Maybe just do that. I'll pitch in with Morgan to pay for the fucking shipping.
Okay, let's do it, bitch.
Okay. But like I said, I was listening to a lot of Smashing Pumpkins recently, so it's like I obviously do not have a problem listening to music that is like fronted by people who I find unbearable and intolerable. I've spun Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness like 16 times this year. Like if I don't care. But the thing about GNR Lies is that like part of it is apparently infamous because Axl drops the hard F slur and the hard racial slur, and that's bad and all, but like I'm telling you, if those two things were not present on this album, I would give it the exact same score, because it is still just as dog shit. For some fucking reason, half of it's like a live album and half of it's not. Both like the studio songs and the live songs sound awful. It's so fucking like every single sound is like, it's like a wall of sound, but it's not a wall, it's like a hallway, and so everything just sounds like mild in the mix, and then there's just Axl's voice, which just fucking swallows everything in it, and it's like it's fucking, if it was anything longer than 30 minutes I would have given it the hard 1 out of 10, but like it's just so like, when it's really loud and aggressive, it's just kind of annoying. And when it slows down, it's fucking hilarious. Like I can imagine August sitting down and listening to the ballads on this album and cackling. It's oh God, it's an experience. Why I literally just don't understand the Guns N' Roses thing. Like there's some bands that I don't like where it's just like, yeah, I still get it. Like I understand the popularity and acclaim of Maroon 5 more than I understand Guns N' Roses.
Sweet Child of Mine is a great song. I firmly believe that, and the rest of Appetite for Destruction is pretty bad, but that's a great song, and I think that having a couple of great songs like that is probably the reason for this level of popularity that they have. I mean,
Slash is a good guitarist, for the record. I will say that much. I mean, I definitely understand that side, but I mean, it's like, Smashing Pumpkins are better for more than just their guitar tones,
Billy Corgan's a better guitar player than Slash.
By a lot, too. It's not even close.
Slash is not even a notable guitar player. It's like how Angus Young is famous for AC/DC. Like, because he knows 3 chords and the Thunderstruck riff is pretty cool.
AC/DC is better than Guns N' Roses. I don't give a shit about either band, really, but it's
are better.
But I do need that to be noted.
Yeah,
I hear people talk a bunch of shit about Eddie Van Halen a lot, and at least that motherfucker could actually play.
No, that's nope. Don't like that. August, what you been listening to this week?
First thing, speaking of the N-word, I listened to Elvis Costello and the Attractions Armed Forces. This is a really fun, kind of spunky, new wave, kind of early new wave album. Elvis, I think, has a really funny, witty style of songwriting. Here it's a lot of metaphors for like World War II and tying that into like relationships and just getting along with other people. And
Elvis Costello is a new wave musician?
yeah.
I have never heard an Elvis Costello song. I need to like put that to the forefront, but I had no fucking clue. I thought he was like some singer-songwriter motherfucker. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, the song I'm referring to is the wildly popular Oliver's Army, which that's a really good song. A lot of it's really good. It's just really tightly paced, a lot of fun, catchy songs on here. I give it a recommendation because it's good. Next thing from an artist who has not released 50 albums, only 5. Dismemberment Plans Change. This is, I liked it a fair bit, I thought. It's very different from like Emergency and I, and even Is Terrified, taking a lot more of a mellower approach to their sound. I guess it's, at least at the time being, it's probably my least favorite of those 3, but that is very subject to change as Tyler has alluded to this being an album that grows on you with time.
Look, if Emergency and I is an album about, you know, having it being in a state of panic as you become an adult and enter this world that is just terrifying and alien to you, then Change is about being like, I say this as though I'm not. I say this as though I am older than I am, but I'm not. But Change is like being in your late 20s and things have settled down a bit and you're settling into a kind of more suspended unease about everything. And the classic way of describing it is it's the mature record because it's less kind of frenetic and all over the place. But the songwriting, I think, is still 100% there. Some beautiful, some of Travis's best songwriting ever on this record. It's just one of those albums that sneaks up on you. It did for me. It was my least favorite D-Plan album for a while.
Of the 3 that matter.
I mean, we don't acknowledge the existence of Uncanny Valley, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, I love that record to bits. It's grown on me a lot with the years. But you'll be pleased to hear that because I don't actually know if either Jake or Morgan have heard it, I put Emergency and I on the Record Club lineup.
Okay, I have actually heard it. I liked it a lot when I first heard it. So that's an interesting record to talk about.
Well,
that'll be an easy one to talk about.
I put it on.
That fucking opening track lives rent free in my head. Occasionally, I'll just hear like that weird groove that song has. I'll just be sitting there being like,
I put it on. I put it on there because to me it's one of the most important indie rock records ever made. I think it's on the level of OK Computer in terms of greatness and importance. And it's also a very thematically similar record to OK Computer. They're both basically about the same ideas. And so I put it on so that we would be discussing it shortly after we do discuss OK Computer. But it's an amazing record. The songwriting's there. I listened to it last night and I think The City might just be the best song ever written by anyone.
It's very good. I would not deny you that.
I listened to The City last night and I felt like this is as good a piece of music as anyone's ever made. It just felt that when I was listening to it.
And it's my second favorite.
Yeah, which says a lot.
Yeah, no, but I'm not like trying to, I am being a little sarcastic with that, but it's a wonderful, wonderful song. It's like God tier stuff.
Yeah, but anyway, Change, good album.
Next thing from The Replacements, Pleased to Meet Me. Please, I think that's it. Yeah, Pleased to Meet Me. This is a really stark, interesting turn away from Let It Be. I think this album has like production of it is just like on that front it's wildly different. It's a lot louder and more confrontational. There's obviously a much bigger budget going into this, but I think what's still at the heart of it is Paul Westerberg being an amazing writer and just writing really good songs. Like The Ledge, Alex Chilton are phenomenal songs. It's really well put together. I don't like it as much as Let It Be, but I think it's still phenomenal. Next thing, from Yo La Tango, I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One. Really good. It's defiant, like really big staple of that 1997 year. A lot of good stuff came out that year. It's a really eclectic, diverse mix of songs that are all just, all of them I think have something at least interesting there, and for you to chew on it. It kind of took me by surprise, because by the end of the week I liked it more than I liked Painful. Personally, because I really found a lot of the refinement of their sound and how it just, like, how great the highs on this record are to be really stellar.
It's like a template for so much of indie music that would follow, and like and what's great about it is that it's a template for like so many different styles, like so many varied artists. Like it's not just that it's this, you know, singer-songwriter folk record. It's a shoegaze album. It's noisy, it's reflective, it's beautiful, it's post-rocky at points. It's just,
and then at other points it's a Beach Boys album.
Yeah, I mean, right, of course, the Beach Boys cover. I mean,
yeah,
I can't think of a cooler concept than taking a Beach Boys deep cut and turning it into a shoegaze fucking noise rock song.
Yeah, that's
dope shit.
A lot of fun. Final thing from this week, from Primus, Sailing the Seas of Cheese. This was an album I enjoyed a fair bit. I really got into the humor of it. I really liked the really stellar use of like wonky time signatures, like the 5/4 and the 11/8 is really fun. It has a lot of like charm and kind of silliness to it that I think a lot of music from 91 didn't have in the same way. I mean, the best approximate is like Mr. Bungle in terms of that silliness. And like, it's also quite obviously a huge influence on like Black MIDI, because there's songs where it's like, oh, that like Jerry was a race car driver. That's like just exactly the delivery on on like John 50. That's just what that is and who you're taking that from. And yes, Les Claypool is a fantastic bassist, and he writes really fun, catchy, memorable bass lines, and I enjoyed the album a lot. But yeah, Morgan.
Well, I didn't listen to shit this week. With one exception, that being the first Los Campesinos album, Hold On Now, Youngster. Yeah, and that's the shit. That's the shit right there.
Tyler taking another W.
Yep. As he should. I mean, that reaction really tells you all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Good album.
At Connor.
Okay, is that all? That's all you wanted to mention, Morgan?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't listen to shit.
Fair enough. Okay, so I'll shout out a couple of things then. I haven't actually listened to much new music this week either, but I will shout out a few things that I did get to listen to. So one thing I'll shout out is I listened to, okay, actually I've got a few things to shout out, and I'll try and rattle through them. So I listened to the new Slater-Kinney album. I don't remember if I talked about this last week. I don't think I did, but I listened to the new Slater-Kinney record.
How indicative.
Path of Wellness, their first record without Janet Weiss, founding member and drummer. And not to, reduce it to something as simple as her presence being not there, but it stinks. It's not a good record. It's bad. It's I mean, it's not like bad, but it's also like there's nothing interesting at all. It's the most 5 out of 10 record of all time. It's a quintessential 5 out of 10 album. It's
Is
kind
this
of
anything? The album.
It's kind of like they obviously they know they don't have Janet, so they kind of change tack from what they usually do, and it's kind of like a soft rock-esque record, and it's just really weightless and
How the fuck does what?
yeah, it's just like it's not even as interesting as that makes it sound.
The band that made The Woods.
What?
But yeah,
This is
I don't. Yeah, it's not Sleater-Kinney without Janet. It just isn't. Like you don't. I don't even know why they're even bothering with. Just make up a new band name. You're both big enough. Corin and Carrie. Carrie's huge outside of Sleater-Kinney. You're both big enough to.
That'd be like if. Sorry, that'd be like if they did Block Party without Matt Tong. Oh fucking wait!
You know what? I'll listen to hymns before I listen to this record because that record is bad in an interesting way, whereas this just isn't. I mean, yeah, I might have more to say about it if it had a Love Within style dookie on it, but it doesn't. I listened to a record that I put off for a while because supposedly it's the point at which this band kind of I guess falls off in the opinion of most people. And also Morgan gave this record a 5 out of 10 as well. So it never particularly, I just thought, okay, I'll get to this eventually. But I listened to it and I'm proud to say I like this record a lot. And that is Jimmy World's Chase This Light, which
all right.
is a really good album, like really good. It definitely has a couple songs on it that are a bit not that great, but like most of it is really fucking good. Like I'm annoyed at myself for putting it off for as long as I did. Like I really enjoyed that record.
The first 3 songs are fantastic. The rest of it strikes me as completely immemorable.
No, I mean, I beg to differ. I enjoyed it quite a lot. Let me just get it up here. Yeah, Big Casino obviously is one of their greatest songs. If they could do one thing, it's open a record like really, really strongly. And also it finishes really, really strongly as well. Dizzy is one of their best closers too. So and great songs in between. Like it's definitely not like a great album. It's a 7 out of 10 record. But it's good enough for me to wonder why I waited so long to bother listening to it, considering how much I love Futures and Bleed American. My hot take is that I have this rated the same as I have Bleed American rated. I think they're similarly mixed records for me that have incredible highs. So yeah, I'll own that. I also listened to Alice in Chains' self-titled record, which was a long time, honestly. Fantastic. No hot takes there from me. Absolutely. Well, maybe it is a hot take, generally speaking, to say that record is amazing, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it as much as they do talk about Dirt or Jar of Flies anyway. But that record is grueling and beautiful, and it is not hard to see why it was the last record that Lane participated in before his sad death, like 7 years later, I think. But it's a really stellar record. It has a couple of my favorite, well, it has more than a couple, but 2 songs that immediately jump out to me are Heaven Beside You, which is just amazing, and Frogs as well, which is an absolute showcase for both what Lane can do with his voice in the most harrowing ways possible, and also why Jerry is one of the greatest guitar players of his era too. But the whole record is superb. I'll also shout out, I listened to a huge record for one of our good friend Connor. The record Waited Up Till It Was Light by the band Johnny Foreigner, who, if you follow our friend Connor on Twitter, his profile picture is the cover of this album. It is.
Oh, that's what it's from.
It is. So this is. So I listened to this record because Connor said that this band was quite similar to Los Campesinos, and he's not wrong. It's very similar to that early Los Campesinos. If you like Hold On Youngster, you'll like this record. But it's like it's that, except it's like heavier. And the drumming on this record is insane. It's like, it reminded me specifically of Matt Tong on Silent Alarm. It's that level of good. Really, really amazing record. I can't impress enough how strong this record is, and I can't believe that it's not bigger than it is. It definitely, like, as an indie record, you can tell it's not a record made with a high budget or anything, but it goes fucking hard from start to finish. It's a short, punctual, fantastic listen. Of all of the records I'm talking about this week, in this segment anyway, that's definitely the one I recommend the most. Now it's time to move to our main reviews of the day, and the first record we're going to talk about is I'm very excited that we're going to talk about this record, incidentally. I'm excited this record exists, because for a while I wasn't sure if it was going to. Danny released a string of singles, just standalone singles, earlier this year, and there were like 3 or 4 of them, and I thought, I loved all of them. They're all great. And I'm like, I hope he releases enough that I can compile them into like a short album to like have, to listen to. And I was not expecting what we got, which was he compiled them all right, but he threw in a bunch more, and he has gifted us the 18-track monolith that is Big Mess. And boy, am I excited to talk about this record. I don't know if I've been this excited to talk about a new release in a while, weirdly enough, just because this is such a fucking, I don't know. I don't even know if interesting is the right word. It is interesting, but like, it's it's such a unique album. That's a good word for it, I think. Mm-hmm. It is technically his second solo album, but it is his first solo album in 37 years. It's fair to say that he spent decades composing scores after dissolving Oingo Boingo, his legendary Zolo new wave act of the 1980s. And his work in composing has left him in a position where he's able to orchestrate and construct music efficiently. And so I want to start by giving a bit of a context from an interview that Danny himself gave with Stereo Gum in terms of how this project came to be. And he says that it was a perfect storm of elements happening at the same time. For one, I was enormously angry and frustrated about America and what was happening to it. I saw a civil war coming, and I didn't know if I wanted to be around for that. I had a lot of venom in me, and I didn't realize it until I started putting lyrics to the song Sorry, which started everything. I had to let that venom out somehow. 2020 also happened to be the year I took no film work because I wanted to give the whole year over to concerts. And of course, 100% of them were cancelled. I was probably the only person ever to be booked at Coachella that was going in with no material to start with. I spent 3 intense months putting it together once I agreed to it. And I was really inspired by doing a show of extreme contrasts, a mishmash of retooled Oingo Boingo songs against film music, but with all of these visuals. I went to Coachella in 2019, and I got really excited about this idea. I put 3 months of work into that, and then it got cancelled 3 weeks before the show. And so I was at this point where, for the first time in a quarter century plus, I had an electric guitar in my hand, I was singing and rehearsing with other musicians, and it all just exploded. So there was all that energy and then nothing. On top of that, there was isolation and quarantine and being cut off with most of my family, except for my wife, my 16-year-old, and my dog. I wasn't alone, but I have a big extended family that gets together every week, and I was cut off from all of them. When I finally came out of a month of catatonic depression and realizing the whole year was going to be a wash, I started working on this record. Initially, Danny had originally envisioned it to be an EP, but eventually he realized that he had lots more songs than he needed for an EP, and decided to construct them together into this record, Big Mess. So yeah, it's fair to say that the sprawling heft of this record, in combination with its on-the-nose title, this is a big mess, I made a mess, describe both its appeal to those who love it and also the reason that others might fairly label it insufferably indulgent. And the exciting thing for me is that I don't really know where any of you would land in this regard. I think I listened to this record. I'm totally in the bag for this album. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's really good. And I thoroughly enjoy listening to it. And I listen to it and I hear the incredibly well produced prog sound that it has, the zany energy that it has, and I think that it should be a win on this podcast. But it's also like so on the nose and so like very direct about what it's about and unashamedly pissed off that I could very easily see it falling flat. So I'm very curious to see how you guys have found this record, have experienced this album, what sort of expectations you had going into it. I know I was hyping up the singles, but I don't know if some of you might not have even heard them going into this record. So who wants to kick off with their experience, just hearing this record and what that was like?
I'll happily do it because my thoughts are super, well, they're not incredibly specific, and I feel like that's pretty much to be expected with an album like this, but mainly because I'm going to have the most boring opinion on this album. And not at all for the reasons that I thought I would. It's that, yes, big mess. That's the sort of thesis going into this. This is a big indulgent. It's a fucking double album. It has, it's got this huge opulent sound about it that, obviously takes influence from the fact that Danny Elfman is primarily a film composer, and like that aspect of it and the specific arrangements. In that regard, I think are like one of the unabashed compliments I'll give the album, is that they're really, they sound great. They're really ornate. They're really full. It's just a very satisfying listen in that respect, at least. The problem I have with Big Mess is that I wish it was messier. I don't know, man. This was a really strange beast for me, because I was like, this and another album we're going to talk about this week have the same problem for me. That being that on an individual song by song basis, I don't really have a whole lot of problems with the songs. Is that like, they don't leap out and, they don't rustle my jimmies necessarily, but like, I think the vast majority of them are very good. It's just that when you put them all together in an album, it just really sucks the wind out of it. Like the momentum is just fucking killed. And it's not even necessarily by the length. I think a lot of it has to do with the production of this, which, again, on like paper and in like the strictest sense, it sounds good. But like, am I insane, or is the like range and like the dynamic nature of the volume on this album, like in terms of like the actual energy, it feels like every single part of this album is as loud as the other parts. Like no matter how like subtle the instrumentation is on one part, like it'll be like maybe in an acoustic section, Danny will just be singing, and maybe it'll be backed by some like light strings or something. And then like when the album actually gets properly like loud and has like riffs and stuff, it sounds as loud as itself. And that really irks me for some reason. I don't know if it's very strange, because it's like, it's almost kind of like Devin Townsend in a lot of respects. That's one artist who I really kept coming back to, especially his most recent album, Empath, which again, source of frustration for me. I love Empath. I think Empath kicks ass. It's one of my favorite Devin Townsend projects, purely because it is an insanely long, indulgent, fucking Devin tinged with Frank Zappa mess. It's cool. I like it. But then there's this one, and like the album just seems to have one mode, and like all the things about it that I thought would bother me don't. Like the sampling Donald Trump thing is just like, okay, like, all right, that's fine. That doesn't really bother me. Stuff like just saying, oh, what is it, where he has some weird vocal refrain on like some song in the back half where it's like fuck puppy or something. He's got these weird isms that are very entertaining when they do come along. And I will say, just for the record, my rating is sort of a combination of what I would rate each individual side of the album, because it's a double album, and the first part of it, I would like, honestly, that's the part of the album that really drags it down for me, is that it's an album that seems like the first 3 songs in it, with the exception of Parts of Sorry, is that it just seems like it's an intro to a song, and then the intro and then it never moves on. It the progressions of the songs just do not feel satisfying to me. Everybody Loves You, on the other hand, I feel like that's where it kind of picks up a little bit, and Dance to the Lemurs is kind of fun and all, but then it's the rest of that album, or that part of the album, just really drags itself down, and that lack of progression tied in with the fact that it has that lack of dynamic volume that I mentioned, just when you have to sit down and listen to it multiple times, it makes it really fucking difficult, especially considering the way one of the albums we're listening to this week particularly arranges itself. I will say I like the second half a bit more. I think all of the songs a lot of them are a lot more succinct. A lot of the run times of the songs are a little bit shorter. I find them all generally to have a little bit more energy and just a lot more personality, frankly. It's just that I feel like Danny Elfman has unfortunately internalized a lot of the attitude of his late era soundtracks for Tim Burton, and that a lot of it does sound very stock Danny Elfman. It's just kind of it's the strings and it's and where it doesn't sound bad. It doesn't sound if you listen to it in isolation, you're oh, this is good, but there's just nothing about it. It just kind of, and it's long and it's clunky, and I literally get any reaction to this album possible, and I feel like such a fucking fuddy-duddy being the way I am, because I wish this could be an empath where I could be over the moon about it and talk about how I love all of its little things, but it feels like he's holding back. It's for as weird as this album is and can get, I really think that he can do more. Maybe it's just the fact that this podcast has introduced me to albums that are from people like Mike Patton, where we listen to albums like Mr. Bungle, and they're these insanely dynamic, insanely weird and cool, but also musically proficient things. And this just I feel like it gestures at something toward that, but it just doesn't quite hit it, and it's really frustrating for me. But I'm glad we covered it in a sense, though, just because this is such a fucking bewildering project in many aspects. I just feel like a lot of it just kind of hits me very bluntly.
Fair enough. I can't pretend to be surprised that would be the response you'd have to it. And fair enough. I don't want you to feel I mean, you're for all I know, maybe I'm the only one that really likes this record. But I will say that I think the incorporations of Danny's string arrangements and the general orchestration on this record, I think is stellar and really creative and inventive. And one of my favorite aspects of the way that the songs are arranged, especially the ways in which Danny often uses strings to harmonize with guitar parts to add this real sense of weight to everything. In terms of dynamics, I would probably have to agree that I don't think this is a particularly big record in terms of dynamic range. It's very loud, it's very intense, it's very in your face. I definitely had the Devin Townsend comparison. For me, I experienced the sound of this record in very similar way to I experienced the sound of a Devin Townsend record, especially kind of a later era Devin Townsend record. That maximalist approach is really appealing to me. And I think that Danny's particular vocal style as well is really unique and kind of strange and eerie and ghostly and bad's not right, because he didn't have a bad voice, but it's it's just kind of creaky and hingy and weird and stuff, and it just adds this real
his background in Oingo Boingo really does show through on this album, and when it does, that's when I like the album the most.
Absolutely. And there's a real sense of that spirit of Oingo Boingo in this music as well, in terms of a lot of the things that Danny talks about as well. I think it'd be very easy and fair to go after this record for a lot of the things that Danny sings about and a lot of his lyric writing, which is obviously, that phrase I often pull out, it's not going to win a Pulitzer. But part of the joy is in the rugged simplicity of it, and it doesn't mean that it always lands necessarily. Another way that I'll counter you is I actually think the first half of this record is the half. If I had to separate the two halves, which I think is a valid thing to do, I think the first half is maybe the stronger half. In fact, and to counter you even more, I'll say that the first three tracks are maybe my favorite part of the record. I think it opens really strongly. I think that Sorry specifically is the best song on the album, and beautifully emblematic of everything that Danny is trying to do with this record. It makes sense that Danny says it was the first song that he wrote and recorded for this album, one of the singles, and it really has a nice fusion of all of the chaotic elements that he explores in more detail throughout the record. Yeah, his mode here is definitely, obviously, on the face of it, far from the sprightly zolo new wave of Oingo Boingo, but the polished but heavy prog style is a really nice fit for the attitude that he has as a writer and as a creative that made that early music so great. And the Devin Townsend is obviously, that comparison's obviously really there. Other comparisons that come to mind while listening to it are Tool, and especially Cardiacs as well, definitely come to mind.
Yeah.
Has the same sort of manic energy as a Sing to God, which is no surprise that I enjoy the record quite a lot for that. There's even moments here in terms of production that evoked for me Trent Reznor. There's moments of like classic of clean acoustic guitar on Everybody Loves You, and other moments on the record as well where you get this real crispness that strongly reminds me of him. And there was another comparison that I'm going to bring up shortly with that involves him as well. But yeah, Sorry, I think, is a great entry point into this record. It opens with an absolute blitz of noise, chopped up vocal loops, and Danny's presence is instantly theatrical. And I think that theatrical style that he has, that real kind of like vocal, I don't know the terminology to describe his specific range, but it ties the whole music together. I don't know that it would work as well with someone who sings in a more traditional way. There's a moment in the heavy piano and string led True, the second track, where the guitar solo enters the mix by harmonizing perfectly with Danny's own vocal, and it rules. You get a sense of his arranging skills across this record as well, in multiple of my favorite tracks, one of which is the third track, In Time, which I think is the point in terms of subject matter where the record, it becomes clear what Danny's goal is here. This is Danny Elfman's quarantine album. It is intended to reflect the last year and the state of mind it has instilled in him. And he reflects on a number of very kind of common topical themes. Everybody Loves You. He doesn't have the gentlest approach to this kind of modern malaise subject matter. But I love Everybody Loves You as well. I like the way that it captures the disconnect of communicating exclusively through the disconnect of technology. There's obviously multiple references specifically to Zoom and cameras and the technological veil on this album that again, they're heavy-handed. There's no doubt that this is a heavy-handed record. I cannot deny that in the slightest. And normally that would be the kind of thing that bugs me. But Danny gets away with it because of his whole attitude, his irreverence, his irony as well. There's definitely a heavy helping of that here too. And just as well, again, it may be reductive, but also just how much this record just goes. It goes a long way to making up for the bluntness of this record, and complements that bluntness as well quite nicely in certain ways too.
Can I just say that maybe like I definitely don't find it as aggravating as I thought I would in some instances. That said, like, while the sampling of something like Trump doesn't really bother me in theory, I will say that like the lyrics on Choose Your Side are August made a joke earlier where he was just like, I see you participate in society. It's that's the song. That's literally the fucking song. That was the one point on the album that really just like, I was like, I will let you get away with a lot, but that's I draw the line in the sand somewhere.
Yeah, and I won't defend those lyrics at all. I do think that is a low point on the record. It's not my least favorite track, incidentally, and I think what saves it, this song specifically, is that I think it's one of the coolest songs in terms of its instrumentation. It has this really heavy industrial percussion that I absolutely love. In fact, I wish he used it more on the record. I love the noisiness, the distortion. There's guitar solos across this record, which I love the inclusion of, but the one in this track specifically feels like it's fucking tearing a hole in the sky when it comes in. The layered vocals are great. It is a real shame that these are the weakest lyrics of the record, and the Trump sample, while it's brief and I do forget about it pretty quickly, there's no reason it needs to be in the song, and it definitely is something that Danny should have left out. But I don't know. Ultimately, I forget about my issues with this song pretty quickly. Anyway.
The thing about this album is that sonically I enjoyed pretty much all of it. Um, uh, it's a touch too long. Could have used some trimming, I believe. But I think pretty much everything here, musically, compositionally, is really, if not stellar or original, at least very, very entertaining. The lyrics for me tend to vacillate between being so vague and nondescript that any supposed meaning that can be derived from a an album based around politically and emotionally charged times just completely kneecaps any of that's effect, or it's just outright annoying. Yeah, it's a weird place to be left in terms of my emotional response, because it's largely just, yeah, I enjoy this a lot. But if I sit here and try to parse what choose your side is like really getting at, I'm just like, okay, I can literally just open up a fucking news app.
What I will say is that I don't think Danny has written songs here to be parsed. And I don't think Danny envisions his writing here as particularly insightful or literate or whatever. These, I think, are, and this is part of the reason why I think he chose to make this record musically the way he did, is that these are just raw expressions. Like, these are angry songs that are trying to convey that anger and be cathartic in that way, while also being entertaining and having the kind of zolo spirit of his early music. Like, it's irreverent. It's genuinely angry. It's also genuinely irreverent. It is trying to temper the frustration with comedy, and with, or not necessarily comedy, but just with like kind of ironic levity, I guess. It's just, I don't find it to be a record that is trying to grasp for profundity. I just find it to be a record that is fun.
All right, so that said, really good at being the entertaining, irreverent, ironic part. The catharsis that he's getting at completely falls short for me, because the music, the sound of the album itself never really gets that across to me. I don't know, maybe I just listened to too much Dillinger and I'm just used to having my head beaten in when I want cathartic music. These lyrics could be angrier. There's a lot to be angry about if you want to do that. I don't know why you're sort of beating around the bush about what is actually pissing you off here in terms of these lyrics. I don't know.
Fair enough. It's a whole spirit. Like, again, I wouldn't predict that you would be hugely into Oingo Boingo, for instance. And that is not really anything to do with the music, but it's just because the spirit of this kind of style of music, this kind of attitude that Danny has, is, I think, very different from the sort of stuff that you're normally into. So I'm not too surprised, but I'm pleased you enjoyed listening to it.
It's just like, damn, this really ain't no Mr. Bungle self-titled, is it?
Yeah, I won't lie. That was something that did come up on my mind. And, I not to be really reductive about it, but it's just like, it just kind of accomplishes the same thing. And Mr. Bungle, I feel like, is like, people can sort of break that album down and just be like, or not break it down and just kind of be like, and sell it short in a lot of ways and just sort of be like, oh, well, it's just kind of crazy. But like, if you break it down, I feel like it's, genuinely incisive and it is kind of angry about some things, but it's a little bit more nuanced than people give it credit for. And I feel like that nuance maybe isn't here. And I'm not saying it has to be, but I am saying that it's just like, it sort of comes to a point where it's just like, okay, well then what does it accomplish if it doesn't accomplish that? Because it doesn't really do it. It just kind of gestures. It's a lot of half measures. I feel like if Danny really put his mind to it, and like when Tyler talked about how this album came to be and Danny's creative process and like everything that happened, that made everything on this album make so much fucking sense to me. I feel like if Danny like literally like from the outset decided to make a project that was like this, but like even went in with it with the mindset of making a creative indulgent mess from the get-go, I feel like it might be better. This just sort of feels like everything is just sort of like thrown and like together. It's like it's cohesive sonically, but like from a structural point of view, I just think it's like, all right, if you put a little thought into this, you could have something. Because like I want a Danny Elfman album that I can be over the moon about, because I think he's got it in him. Because I like a lot of his scores. He's got a lot of good music work, but it's make more prog albums, Danny, is what I'm saying. It's just that don't make them all about COVID.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
August.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with a lot of the lyrical criticisms coming so far from Morgan and Jake about this, but I do also want to say I really do appreciate a lot of the zany quirkiness being brought to this album. I do think that is something that has been lacking this year from a lot of major releases, so I found that out. So that definitely made up for a lot of my grievances lyrically with it, that it's like, you know, this may not be like the most intelligently written album of the year, but it does do something I feel you can't find in a lot of other places. And that's what I think really captivated me about it for the most part. I quite enjoy the instrumental palettes. I think the like the fusion of what is obviously his movie soundtracks is very compelling and interesting, kind of in his own lane in that sense. And I really do like the super progressive moments on here, like Everybody Loves You being my favorite song personally.
Agree.
And yeah, just, I mean, the genre fusion itself here is really interesting. I guess what takes a lot of it out for me is stuff that's also been mentioned with a little more onto that, namely production and dynamic range not really satisfying me, giving me a lot of punch. Another thing that really took me out of it, and I doubt this is an issue anyone else had because it's dumb and me being me, but I couldn't help but like feel Danny Elfman's vocals were like separate from most of these tracks. Like I couldn't help but listen to it and feel it was like two separate studios, two separate recording sessions, kind of like someone on YouTube singing over like just the instrumental version of a song.
I do kind of get what you mean sometimes, August. I did kind of occasionally feel that, where it was just like they just sort of felt like they were happening in different atmospheres.
Yeah, and that's something that always takes me out of a record like this, when I can just see the studio it's being recorded in and see the precision and the surgicalness with which something is done. It really bothers me for whatever reason, and I just didn't really care for it here. Overall, the record just kind of frustrates me because there's a lot I do enjoy and a lot of I want to enjoy more about it, but there's just parts of it that kind of equate to being just kind of cancel each other out for me. I will say I am generally positive on it. It's just a frustrating experience, especially with that runtime, which is an advantage and a disadvantage because I think it's impossible you don't find at least one track you like, but I also think that comes at the cost of parsing through so much crap that you're gonna hate to some extent, but that's kind of how I feel.
Fair enough. I think that for what all that has been said about the bluntness with which Danny writes here, there are genuine moments of greatness, I think, or at least moments of where the way he's writing and the way he's singing are like perfect for the song and very effective. The track Serious Ground, for instance, is very obviously about the rise of Trump and the ascendance of white supremacy into the view of the public. Danny's also very blunt about that in the song. But there's also some of the best and most vivid lines of the record here. I particularly love the lyrics, "The crowd searched like a dead thing waking. crawling from the sludge of a cold black lake, rising with their clenched teeth, jaws vibrating, and the teeth click clacks, such a curious sound. Moments like those are really majestic and vivid in a really great way. And
Damn, I love Bjork.
and there's that level of detail across a lot of the songs in this record as well. Another track I want to shout out is one of the absolute highlights of the record for me, which is the closing track on side A, We Belong, which is this beautiful track that's very different to anything else in this record. And this is, for me, a moment where I start to disagree on comments that it's too samey or not kind of dynamic enough, is that there are moments like this that are really tender and beautiful that I love. And also it was at this point, seeing the 2-disc structure preserved on Apple Music, and then reflecting on the general sound of this album, not just the heaviness, but the ways it was heavy, with its on-the-nose lyricism that could easily be mocked, but is also just righteous and emotional and sentimental. It was at that point that I realized this album does have a clear precedent, which is 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. Every critique and every compliment I could level at this record, I could equally level at that record. But regardless, I love them both. This is certainly not the era-defining classic that is, but I think at this point, I basically enjoy these 2 records in the same ways. And I also think it's thrilling to see an artist, any artist, attempting to do a record like this. The Fragile is this big opus album with imperfect moments where the scope and the size and the heft of it is the appeal, and it sweeps you up beyond the flaws. And for me, for the most part, Big Mess does that too in very similar ways. And it's also structured quite similarly as well, with a lot of the really gripping, heavy stuff in the first half and some more stranger bits in the second half of the record.
Can't imagine what you're talking about.
Okay. Happy is another one of the loose singles that opens disc 2. I really love this song. And I think Danny's statement on the creative process for making this song is a good kind of encapsulation of the record. He said, I want to have a bit of fun creating a song that begins like a bubbly pop song and slowly degrades into a subversive and nasty rant. At the beginning, the song pulls in one direction, and by the end, you're going, what is this place I was lured into? It's supposed to be designed like a trap. That starts out pretty and ends up being despicable. This is the song, incidentally, where there is a verse where he just repeats the word puppy fucker over and over and over and over. And I fucking love that shit. I don't know why, I just do. It's the balls to the wall absurdist approach where there's no half measures that I respect. Another song I love is Just a Human, which is the song that follows it on the second half, about him going stir crazy in isolation. Has another really great and just naughty guitar solo that I love. Reminds me of the best of late period Devon, condensed into 2 action-packed minutes. Devil Take Away has one of my favorite leads of the record, this really addictive stop-start riff that lurches and pounds as Danny's just kind of raving madly behind it. This is one of the songs where there's the least clear logic to anything that he's talking about. And that's where I think the song succeeds, because it just has the feel of some crazed manic rant, and the riff is so good that you just get swept up in that. It's really awesome. It's moments like this where I start to think this might be one of the most fun albums that this year has given us so far. It hits all the dopamine spots without fail, and then it twists and contorts those dopamine spots until you feel your brain melting out of your ears. Another song I love on this record, which I wouldn't be surprised to hear you all hate, is the track Love in the Time of COVID, which I will admit that title had me concerned. But this, I think,
I want to say, that's maybe the nicest thing that I can say about this album, is that it has a song called Love at the Time of COVID on it, and I didn't hang myself.
It's a great fucking song. I love that song.
It's good. Yeah.
It's a decent song.
Awesome. Yeah. I love this is, again, I don't really agree or see August complain about the vocals seeming distant, or like not distant, but like distinct, because this is a good track where I like the way that Danny uses panning in this track to like move the vocals around you and move the instrumentation around you, and it feels like it's all swirling together in a way that's very clear, and I love that. This way the strings are integrated is really nice as well. This is one of the tracks on the record that most has the feel of that zolo energy, that 80s new wave energy that Oingo Boingo were all about. The track Native Intelligence opens with this bass part that reminded me of something, and I couldn't fucking figure out what it was for ages. It's just this really deep rumbling bass line, and I couldn't figure it out. And then it just hit me this morning that it's the bass part that opens Strip the Soul by Porcupine Tree, and it's almost exactly the same at the beginning of the song.
Hell yeah.
And then the strings come in, and I completely forget about that because the song completely changes and builds into something huge. I also like the track Cruel Compassion. I like the way that the strings in that track are used as both this kind of dramatic melodic point, but also this kind of harmony to the guitars, as I was saying earlier. A track I don't necessarily love as much to listen to, but I really like what Danny's trying to do with it, is the track Kick Me, which has this nursery rhyme style to it, where it's just the lyrics are very on the nose and it's very blunt in a way that I think doesn't really work on this song. But I like the idea of it. It's a perversion of celebrity culture.
It's very Cardiacs, honestly, in the delivery.
Yeah, totally. And then something that I wanted to mention just to wrap up is that this album actually closes with a track called Insects, which is an Oingo Boingo song that has been reworked to end the record. And
that's one of my favorites. That makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Now that makes a lot of sense. Huh.
And so it's like Danny brings the record full circle. He brings basically his whole career kind of full circle by closing on this cover, or not even a cover because he's like transformed it so dramatically. But it ends the record in this really great place.
I guess
perfectly in keeping with the subject matter, the attitude and approach of the record, and it leaves me with a smile on my face.
I guess one could say it's like a Yo La Tango cover, where he's covering his own song, I guess.
Sure, August. Yeah, you could say it's like that.
Jesus Christ.
Well, goddamn. Okay.
I'm going to pretend that I have any idea what the fuck any of you are talking about at this point.
But yeah, I mean, I completely understand. I like what Jake said. I have to echo what Jake said. Completely understand any reaction to this album. I'm maybe being a bit extra passionate to kind of be, because I'm the only person who is. But yeah, really dig this record. I'm glad it exists. It's really entertaining. I'll be having it on rotation a lot this year. Yes, it's not amazing. It definitely has some flaws. I do think that the standard complaint that it is a little too long, as boring a complaint as that is inarguably true here. It could definitely have been trimmed up a bit. But also, like with a record like The Fragile, for instance, like those big, bloated, ambitious rock records that this feels like it's channeling, that's also part of the point as well. So I can't dock it too many points for that, because I definitely respect and admire that whole approach that it has. So yeah, props to Danny. It's just awesome to have artists in the prog sphere like making music as balls to the fucking wall and direct as this. Like, he trims back all the wankery. These songs are really concise and short and punctual, and that's, I think, to the record's benefit. Okay. All right. Favorite tracks and ratings on Danny Elfman's Big Mess.
Big Mess. My three favorite tracks are Everybody Loves You, Insects, and I'll say Tyler wasn't a big fan of it, but I actually did kind of enjoy Kick Me for its weirdness, so I'll throw some love that way. Least favorite, yeah, I'll just go ahead and throw that to Choose Your Side, just because lyrically, but it's not even like dramatically worse than any of the other songs, honestly. And I give the first half of the album I'd give a 5, and the second half I'd give a 6, so I'm evening it out to a 5.5.
All right. My three favorites are Everybody Loves You, Dance with the Lemurs, and I'd say Insects. My least favorite is probably Serious Ground. I'd give it a 6 out of 10.
My three favorites are Sorry, Serious Ground, and Insects. Least favorite, Choose Your Side. And I will give this a 7.
Okay, my three favorite tracks are, let me see. Sorry, definitely. I think the best song on the record. I'll also throw in, I really love In Time. And I'll make my third one, Love in the Time of COVID. Least favorite track is probably Dance with the Lemurs. And I'm giving this record an 8.
All right, that is a 6.6 average.
Well, let's change tack now and move to the second album we're going to be reviewing today, which is
Panopticon is the Kentucky-based repping the one good thing Kentucky has provided to the musical sphere, I guess, other than Slint, which yay for us, I guess. But Panopticon is the project of one Austin L. Lunn. He does both the vocals and the instrumentation. It's been a project that has been fairly prolific. It's only been active since like the late 2000s, and he has made a shitload of projects. He has like a couple of split EPs with some other bands, collaborating with acts like Aerial Ruin. But mainly is just focused on being a sort of fusion of Americana, bluegrass, and folk with sort of more atmospheric black metal stylings, which sort of vary in how he'll go for some like lower fi black metal, something that resembles a bit more of like Dark Throne, or occasionally he'll go towards something that's a little bit more polished that sounds a lot more comparable to something like I'll say. And this project in particular, and again Into the Light, I think with the ellipsis at the beginning and sort of title, is sort of at peace with his last major project, which is called The Scars of Man on the Once Nameless Wilderness. And even if it's not, it's interesting to note that record as being pretty like major in terms of like a sort of stylistic departure. It was a very I'd say it's a pretty bold record, but it's also an album that's very oppressive. It's very like the vocals on that album are very buried. It sounds like it's being recorded in the middle of a fucking cave. And then you have something like this, which is his project from this year, and it's his fucking upteenth album. He's kind of a dude who mixes all kinds of stuff in terms of like content, in terms of like themes. He's got stuff about like sort of a Kentucky being a kind of protest album about coal mining industry. He talks about the beauty of nature a lot, sometimes the harshness of nature, lots of traditional black metal stuff, but with sort of his own bent to it. And Into the Light is sort of, as the title signifies, a bit of a brighter sort of coming out, and I'd say it's one of his most forwardly atmospheric records, while simultaneously being some of his most forwardly impressive instrumentally as well. This album, even for a band that I like a lot, with Panopticon have some great fucking albums. So, you know, when I say that I genuinely think that this is not only the best Panopticon album, but almost indisputably the best Panopticon album, that really fucking means something. This album is something fucking special, man. This is one of the most like invigorating musical experiences I've had in just some time, generally speaking. I am loath to think of very many metal albums that have literally brought me to the point of tears with how beautiful they can become at times. When he brings on the violins, something inside me caves. I don't know what it is, but I just kind of like, oh my God, something's being exorcised out of me. And oh man, anybody who complains about that shit, like go jump off a fucking cliff. You suck.
It makes me think like, why are more people not doing this? This is genius combination of like black metal and this orchestration, this violin and cello that's laid over top of it. Not even just laid over top of it, but
Abigail Williams.
Well, yeah, I have to listen to that still. But it's like, it's not even just laid over top of it. It's weaved into the compositions of these songs themselves. It's an integral part of the music, and and there's a lot of music. It does cheaply use this kind of stringed instrumentation to evoke emotion, and so it's very easy to be something that I have been kind of hesitant to embrace its usage unless it really feels like it's an important part of the music and or like an integral part of what's happening, rather than just something that's been thrown on top of it to add. That's why I don't listen to a lot of like film scores, for instance, because a lot of it is just like, this is just a dramatic cue, which I don't find interesting on its own musically. But the ways that these strings are integrated into this record are absolutely heart-stopping at certain points. There's a moment in the second track, Dead Loon, where the violins kind of surge into the piece at about 5 minutes in. It's the first moment on the record where it actually gets like properly heavy, and it's about 10 minutes into the album. And the violins come in and they just sound titanic. They sound gigantic. And then eventually they give way to those standard kind of tremolo black metal guitars and the blast beats coming in. And it's truly like, this was my first exposure to Panopticon. Obviously saw the atmospheric black metal tag, and actually that kind of threw me for a loop a bit. I wasn't expecting this to be as heavy as it is, but my God, this is heavy as hell. And it's produced in a way that is very oppressive too. Actually, I find the production of this record to be really interesting, because I listened to this album 4 or 5 times now, and the first time I listened to it, it held me at a distance. The way this is produced is so intense. It's so heavy. It's so oppressive. Like, I'm going to lean on those words a lot, really, because I don't really know how else to describe it. Especially coming after the lush, organic prettiness of the opening track, which incidentally is more than just a beautiful opening interlude thing, but is in itself a great piece of music. A lot of the time with these kinds of records, you get like this short piece that lets you enter the record, gently, like the opening of the Mantle by Agalloch, for instance. And it's just like, it's fine. It serves that purpose. Whereas here, I love this opening piece. It's just sensational.
Amazing.
And it flows beautifully into, it's 4 minutes long, and it flows beautifully into this second track, the first major of many of these heavy, hulking pieces on the record. And the structuring and the pacing of this album is immaculate. You are pulled along into these woven, these really tactfully and intricately woven oppressive arrangements, and there's such a sense of space and dynamics and range in them, and both between the heaviest and lightest moments, such that the whole record feels like this real journey that you're being pulled through. And every single one of these heavy, hulking, huge pieces have moments of what I can only describe as melodic transcendence at certain points, where you are just lifted up by the music. And that element of production, that oppressive element that initially held me at a distance from this record, I couldn't get into it. Once I was able to acclimatize to that, it not only did the record work for me, but that specific style of production enhanced the sound of the record and the impact of these pieces themselves. It really needs to be heard with properly good headphones and with like high-end lossless files as well, because if you are listening to this with like cheap earbuds or lo-fi headphones, then the heaviness, the oppressiveness of that production will just sound muddy. And there's a distinction between muddy production and the way that this is produced. One thing I really liked, or that I noticed, is that I visited the Bandcamp page for this artist. And incidentally, if you're ever reviewing an artist that's, their primary way of selling their music is through Bandcamp, obviously go and support them on Bandcamp, but check out the Bandcamp, even if you're just streaming it on Apple Music, check out the Bandcamp anyway, because they almost always write really interesting liner notes and have just really interesting details about the album itself. And one thing I particularly liked was when in terms of the credits for this album, it didn't just say that it was mixed. It says painstakingly mixed by Spencer Morris, and that I think is probably put there purposefully so that if you are held at a distance from the way that the album sounds, the fact that, for instance, the vocals are not mixed particularly as high as you might expect them to be mixed in a metal record. The blast beat drumming is a low thumping sound that really rattles your skull in a way you might not be expecting it to be. You might think, well, this is really bizarre and weird, but that saying that it's painstakingly mixed, I guess, is Austin and Spencer's way of saying this sounds the way it does for a very clear reason, and that I think was part of unlocking, getting the sound of this record to click for me. Was one, just listening to it over and over again, but just starting to think about the intention of it, thinking about what this very specific sound adds to the impact of the record. And also, I think if you're going to talk about the impact of the record and why it works or doesn't work, it's also worth touching on, what the intent of the record is. I haven't really dug in too much into the lyrics of this record, but I do find the liner notes of this on the Bandcamp page to be quite moving. Austin writes a very emotional dedication to his friends and family who have pulled him out of the darkness again and again. He says, "To those I have let down or disappointed in my 37 years on this earth, please accept this work as my recognition of a need to change, grow, and atone from my failures. I'm sorry I have let you down, and I will strive to continue to become a better man each and every day I've left on this earth. A portion of the profits from this record will be donated to help folks living with severe mental illness." I don't know Austin's life story. I don't know the situation that led into this, but that already tells you, even before you listen to this record, that this is a very emotionally heavy record that is coming from a place of deep, how to describe it, darkness. There's a quote that I don't know whether it's a quote or whether it's Aaron's own words that he includes at the end of this press summary that says, "Fill your heart with hope. The hope that we will return again into the light. Don't let the fire burn out." So again, obviously there's the title alluded to there. And so you can get a sense from this, even before you listen to the record, of this record being an exorcism of Austin's darkest emotions, a cleansing by fire of the worst and the darkest parts of himself in an attempt to rise out of it all. And that bears out beautifully in the cathartic arrangements of this record, and specifically one of the things that sends chills down my spine when I listen to it is just the way that the vocalizations on this record, like Aaron's screams on this record, though they are mixed low, and I'll talk in a second about why I think that enhances them, but his screams on this record are devastating. Like vocally, he's putting himself through the ringer. I can think of very few records I've heard in recent memory where the vocal performances are as consistently harrowing as Austin's are here. And I think that they are mixed so low enhances that in a sense, because it makes them more devastating. It makes you feel like he is trying to soar through the darkness, trying to escape the muck of the psychological place that he is stuck in. In many ways, the sound of this record reminds me of like sludge metal bands, like Jisoo, for instance. One of my favorite sludge metal records is Jisoo's self-titled record, which I know is one of our podcast friend April's 10 favorite albums of all time. And that's a record that's produced and sounds in a very, very kind of similar, except it's kind of more slow corey and very different to this in a lot of other ways, but it has a similar sense of like it makes you feel like you are like trapped in this sticky muck of tar that is like holding you down, and you're just screaming to escape it and drowning in it. And the more I listen to this record, especially listening to it in darkness, which incidentally I think is maybe the only way to listen to this record, is to put on a really good set of cans, turn the lights out, and just you feel like you're in a storm. You feel like you are completely powerless while listening to this record. It's remarkably impressive. And I mean, I'll shut up for a bit now. I got a bit carried away there, but this record is the experience of listening to this, the sound design, the world it creates and immerses you in is so unique. I have not heard a record that does that immersion in the way that this does, as effectively as this does, in a long time. And so it being my first Panopticon record, I don't have a lot of reference points for it in terms of what Austin normally does, but it does have the feel of like a magnum opus, a thing that has been built towards, that his skills have been refined so that he is able to create this and compose these pieces in the way that they are composed, so that they have so many brilliant melodic moments, so many roaring, incredible climaxes, that it feels in many ways like a life's work. And I am in awe of it.
It's interesting that you say you have yet to dive into the lyrics of this album. And this is something I was going to bring up either way, because he did it with the last album too, is that there have been no lyrics released for this album. And
Well,
you know, if you can make that shit out, you must be an alien with human hearing beyond, you know, the abilities of a person.
It kind of makes sense then, because like maybe the point is not that you need to know what Aaron is singing, but that you don't get caught up in what he's singing, that you just feel the emotion of the way he performs.
It's like we talked about last week, and how it's purely through music are you supposed to get the emotional tenor and the intended effect of what he's going for here. And as like, he's good at that naturally, because as Morgan said, he does that with everything, and he just kind of uses production and the way everything is mixed and put together to kind of tell his story. And I think that's why the like listening to I want to do, I haven't done this yet just because it will take a little bit, but listening to The Scars of Man on the Once Nameless Wilderness and this back to back is like very literally night and day. And I feel like maybe some of the darkness that he alluded to in that liner notes were probably being channeled on that, because that's an album that I would also recommend listening to with as high quality things as you possibly can, just because that has like his production, but like turned up to 11, and how like it's just, you can barely hear the vocals. It sounds like they're being beaten down. And the one weakness that album had for me was that it definitely, the production was almost so oppressive that you couldn't appreciate just how compositionally layered and dense it is. Here we get a little relent from that, as like a moving out of the darkness, I think, just sort of as the title and, you know, kind of implies. But like here, the arrangements and the way everything fits together structurally, like Austin's never been bad at it or anything, but like, holy shit, this stuff is so dense, so layered, so perfectly put together. I am purely in awe of it on a technical level, on everything at all. Like, and that's not even the primary way I engage with it. I just sort of let this happen, and like, to me, emotionally. And this is just, it's simultaneously one of the heaviest things I've heard in some time, and also just one of the most tranquil and beautiful. And like, it's like if somehow it's like somehow if it was channeled from the Phil Elverum album last year, you were able to channel that through black metal. That's the only way I can describe what it had, the intended effect on me at least. And oh god, like, trying to relay what you feel into words with this is just never gonna do the whole record justice. I think it's like, if we hadn't covered 3 or 4 albums on this very podcast, on both new releases, B-sides, and everything, all things considered, if we hadn't covered 3 or 4 very specific albums, this very well might be my favorite album we have reviewed on this podcast across any series we've ever done. This is like, I mean, it's next level for me. Like, this is just, not as just a fan of Panopticon, but just like this, it felt like it was arrived fully formed from the ether. It's supernaturally good. I can only gush.
To touch on what you were saying about, you know, the lyrics not being given, and the vocals themselves, like the emotions and the vocal performances communicating, you know, for them, essentially, regardless of what the lyrics say. I presume perhaps the lyrics are so personal that Austin doesn't necessarily want to share them, perhaps, or he just doesn't want us to get wound up in them. But in that sense, it reminded me of there are a lot of respects in which this record reminded me of the Paranol record from earlier this year, even though it's a very different kind of sound. The emotionality is very similar in terms of the way that emotions are conveyed and the way that they're conveyed as these absolutely titanic, like life-consuming emotions. And just to refine something I said before I shut up again, I talked a lot about, you know, the darkness of this record, but you're right. This is not just a dark, horrific, you know, tormented album. There is a sense of, you know, moving out of that darkness and towards the light. And I think perhaps that's because that is reflected compositionally in a lot of the sort of triumphant climaxes that these songs have, and also the triumphant arc of the record as a whole. But I think is what elevates it into being such a great record, is it has that sustained triumph that makes you feel so alive while you're listening to it, instead of just purely just instead of just purely feeling like shit. You get that feeling of shit, and you get that feeling of like being lifted up out of it. It's like Deaf Heaven, I guess, for an instance, as well.
I was going to talk about how the last time an album of this type made me feel this way was absolutely 100% Sunbather. And like, you know, I still obviously, I mean, I own that fucking thing on vinyl. I love that album. But the difference here is that it's just so like, it's just so unique. Like Tyler said at the very beginning, like, why aren't more people doing this? And I can only just say, fucking more people.
Yeah.
Do this. Please. I will eat it up.
It very much feels like the next sort of Sunbather, not necessarily because obviously that's black gaze, this is atmospheric black metal, they're very distinct things, but like in terms of the appeal of the record and the way that it's composed to have these kind of like welcoming, melodically engaging and triumphant climaxes, it's definitely of a similar tenor. And the way the record ends, I haven't even talked about my favorite track on this record, which is
Embers at Dawn, baby.
Embers at Dawn, which the guest vocals on that track,
notably by I have his name here, Eric Modridge, who is, I think, the best vocalist in metal right now, because he does all the vocals for Bell Witch, a band I know Jake and I really like. Not all of the vocals, but
not know this.
He does Rose of Endless Waves on their first album, and he does, I believe it's the third song on Four Phantoms.
Oh god, that's the best part of Four Phantoms. Oh,
yeah. Shit. He also has a vocal credit. Obviously, I haven't heard this, but he does have a vocal credit on Mirror Reaper as well.
Yeah. And he's Aerial Ruin is the guy, but he's
I said they collabed at a split EP. Why didn't I fucking know this? Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome.
So
he's so good.
So he is the person doing the clean vocals on Dawn, and they are transcendently good. Like they make me cry. I've wept listening to this track, and I bring it up because there is an arc to this record that I think again continues the elevation above just great album to really special album, and that is that it has an arc to it where in those last two pieces, Embers at Dawn and No Hope especially, you really do feel that rising up. Like No Hope is such a beautifully triumphant end to the record, right? And the title tells you that it gives you an idea that that's what it's going to be, and then it really delivers. And yeah, compositionally, it's astounding. I love this shit to bits.
This is maybe the first time on this podcast where we have reviewed an album where I gave every single song a 10. Every single one. I don't think I could do that with like all the members of my top 10 favorite albums.
Baller.
I quit. Music has been invented. Music too.
I wish I had anything insightful to say, because I try to think about this album, and in so doing, I turn it on to think about it further, and then I'm no face in the fucking ocean. Oh, masterpiece. Like no thoughts, head empty, tremolo, guitar, fiddle out of my ass. God damn it. Where am I? What planet is this? Who allowed this? This is stupid. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, baby, 11 out of 10.
Let's go. Right. New rating discovered. We're gonna go full fucking. We're going full fucking Spinal Tap on these. But look, I'm not gonna lie. In that second half of Dead Loons, that is a part of this album where I'm just like, I wish I could fucking give this album an 11. You know, I fucking would. I'd do it.
That's just like when it starts like really fucking like it surpasses the need for numbers. It becomes like we haven't invented the number big enough to properly convey how good that like 2-minute section of music is. I'm dying.
And then after that, you get the fucking 1-2 punch of Ropeburn Exit and Snowless Winter, which is just the hardest fucking shit I've ever heard in my life. Like, oh my god,
the riff in Ropeburn Exit.
Yeah,
is just
so good.
I don't know why I left out Moth Eaten Soul, which is maybe the hardest track in that run, but like, yeah fucking Ropeburn Exit's riff is it's god. It's god.
August, you haven't spoken on this record yet.
Well, I mean, I love it. It's great. It's my second favorite album of the year so far. Yeah, this is something great. I mean, I love the driving guitar leads to this album, the way the guitar just carries you through all these different passages into just crazy, absurd musical ideas that I just absolutely salivate at the mouth to hear. I love the way this is produced. It's this very tasteful mix between dirty, grimy, and clean and shimmering. It nails both of those extremes in the best way possible. I love the way this feels so holistic, with every track leading into each other. I do think I think the strings on Embers at Dawn stand out to me as just particularly beautiful, as just some of the dopest shit put to a record this year. I really wish I had the lyrics to this album, though. That's what pisses me off, because I get they're low in the mix, and that definitely does convey to me the idea that they're not the most important thing going on here. But I would be inclined to give the album the extra half a point if I had them and I could just read through what is going through Austin's head here, because it always aggravates me to some degree not to have that extra layer, which is not to say this won't go up in rating if I never get those lyrics. I mean, it very may well bump up for me just by virtue of hearing it, playing it again and again, because this is very easy to listen to. I found this 70-minute runtime. It was nothing. It was nothing. This album could have, you could have told me this was 20 minutes and I would have believed you, because it feels like 20 minutes in the best way possible. It's absurdly rare to find a record this long with this good of pacing, where there's never really a moment where I'm just Like, yeah, I gotta sit through this shit now. But it's not heard of. One thing I do take a little issue with is I wish he only used the samples from speeches like once rather than twice, because in Moth Eaten Soul and No Hope, these points they're like 3 songs apart from each other, and I just feel you only needed to do it once and I would have gotten the same effect and enjoyed it as much. And it's like having it twice really takes the punch out of one, where it's like, okay, we're just doing the same shit again. But that being said, that's not like a major negative that takes away from the record. It's just a preference where it's like, eh. But yeah, this is really good. The ferocious rhythm sections across this leave me dazzled. It's yeah, best metal record of the year so far. I hope it is topped.
Yeah. I mean, if it's topped, we can stop having this podcast.
That's a challenge.
Everyone.
Metallica. I don't know.
Definitely the ones to do it.
Ride the Lightning 2 incoming.
I'd like to see those fuckers try.
They're just they know they have a song with Moth on it, so they'll feel called out. Lars will just be like, "Oh, this album sounds so stock," and then I'll just beat him to death. I'll fucking beat him to death with his own fucking drumsticks. I need to beat
you to death.
I no offense to Mr. Elfman, but I wish we had some other insanely popular record this week so that this episode would do insane numbers, because I know that no matter the hype this album gets, it still has the stumbling block of you having to recommend it to people and being like, yeah, it's a fucking atmospheric black metal album with folk tinges. It's just like, that is maybe the most musically repellent combo of things to the current musical climate right now. Like, you know, you can sell people on 100 Gex easier than you can sell them on something like this. So I want to pimp the shit out of this.
Maybe in that respect, we should be, dare I say it, thankful for Fantano's review, because in this instance, it seems to have brought this record to the attention of, I mean, obviously, it brings basically any record to the attention of more people, but I mean, yeah.
It's bringing this to the attention of people and not, I don't know, Viagra boys.
Sure, why not?
But if anything, this has incentivized me to like completionist run through this entire discography, because it's pretty big. Yeah. But the thing is with all of his albums is that, like, at least from what I've listened to, like from albums from like at least each section of his career at this point, and it's like Austin simply does not miss. Like he's really good at this. And
absolutely. No, I'm fucking... He
understood the assignment.
Yeah.
He created the assignment and filled it out himself, knowing all the answers.
And now
he's not the assignment, he's the rubric.
And now we grade the assignment.
Oh boy.
Favorite tracks and ratings.
Oh boy.
All right, so we'll do reverse order then. I'll go first. My favorite tracks are Embers at Dawn, obviously, Rope Burn Exit, and Dead Loons. Least favorite track, I guess, as Golden Laughter echoes, but it is an essential part of the progression of the record, so I don't hold anything against it. And yeah, no, I give this record a fucking 10 out of 10. I'm annoyed that I gave a 10 to Cavalcade so recently, so it's kind of sucked the air out of the gravity of this. But
how do you think I feel?
Me too, is Sweet Trip.
But it's a 10.
I ain't gonna lie.
Morgan.
At least yeah, my 3 favorites are The Embers at Dawn, Rope Burn Exit, and No Hope. My least favorite is and I gave it a 10 out of 10. What do you think, Molly?
She likes it. She's a Kentucky girl.
Yeah. So let's see. I guess favorites are Asked and Answered, least favorite, I guess, as Golden
me.
Laughter echoes, I give it an 8.5 out of 10.
All right.
God, Morgan just has so many dogs.
Hates this so much.
Jank.
Well, as I said before here, every song is a 10, but I'm going to pick favorites because I don't fuck. This is the show. Dead Loons, The Embers at Dawn, and No Hope. Least favorite track, fucking shut up. 10.
Joe Mama.
Ooh, yeah.
Like to speak to Mr. Mama.
And that is a 9.6 out of 10.
Beautiful.
The most immediate comparison from this year being To See the Next Part of the Dream by Paranewel, also with a 9.6 out of 10.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good.
All right. So that wraps up our reviews for
Killed
today.
a hoe.
Let's talk about. Let us know in the comments below what you think of either Danny Elfman's Big Mess or Paranormal fucking shit, Panopticons, and Again Into the Light. Let us know in the comments below, or I'll
To
beat
see
your
the
ass.
next part of the light.
If you don't leave a comment, I'll kick your ass. Like and subscribe.
Personally.
Like and subscribe. Share to your
Yep.
friends.
All right. As always,
Hey,
full.
hey,
Oh, wait,
I'm
no.
not fucking finished.
I forgot.
Oh.
We gotta do. Fuck you, buddy.
Stick around. Stick around for subsequent videos that are coming out this week that are going to be on Earl Sweet Shorts. Some fucking songs. And Radiohead's whoever.
Earl Sweet Shorts.
Radiohead's The Life of Pablo. Yeah. So stick around for those. And next week we're going to be reviewing Backwash. I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and Dresses. And we're also going to be reviewing Halloween.
Shit.
Halloween by Halloween. This is going to be a fucking metal ass, dark ass fucking
Yeah.
episode. Shit. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
Rock Over
I'm gonna
London.
get a-
August, you
Gonna
do.
get a neck. Gonna get a
All
neck
right.
tattoo for the occasion.
All right, bitches. Rock Over London. Rock on Chicago. Ron Seal. It does exactly what it says on the tin.